Sense About Science works with the public to make the public interest case, the public interest arguments for sound science and evidence in public life. So we work with hundreds, thousands of scientists, researchers, organisations, and many such organisations across society too, from parent groups to the media, to policy bodies, and many others involved in healthcare delivery and so on. And we work with them to get, oops, I've just jumped. There we go. We work with them to get corrections to the things that pollute that public life. What we particularly do is we take arguments about these sorts of issues to the door of policymakers, of research organisations, companies, media, and we get change. Sometimes we change headlines. We challenge politicians who say things like, it's a great idea to screen every 16-year-old girl for cervical cancer because they've just seen a celebrity story on the news. And we broker relationships that actually prevent those things happening before they start, using, for example, statistical literacy training and all sorts of other ways in which we can try to get people to ask the right questions before they pronounce in public. And we take that, what we mean by public engagement is something that's a lot more than the media and the policy world. I mean, for example, for us, it extends into things like getting biomedical people into conversations on parenting forums where people are debating things like what causes allergies. They're debating things like whether they should stop their kids eating fish after the Fukushima incident. And so it's about bringing the research voice into a lot of places where it doesn't reside naturally. So that's what we do. And we equip people to make sense of it all. So we help them to ask questions of the organisations that shape their lives, that ask them to buy their products, to believe their advertising, to vote for their policies and to read their articles. And we ask the public to ask questions of those, and we help them to make sense of the answers. So we deal with a lot of questions from organisations. Questions from, does cannabis cause schizophrenia in teens? To should pregnant women eat peanuts in pregnancy to avoid later food allergies? Right the way through to, does magnetic underwear help to prevent the menopause? And is it hygienic to pee in the shower? We deal with everything. Well, we did a bit of analysis of the kind of questions that we get, and what it distills down to, the kinds of things that organisations across society ask us about, actually distills down into this. This is pretty much a summary of the sorts of questions people ask. And I really hope that you're recognising some of these questions as very, very similar indeed to the kinds of questions that you're asking yourselves of the research base you're interacting with. And I think this is really instructive, and we'll come back to it. So they ask us a lot of these kinds of questions. Is it a real study? Can we rely on it? What do other scientists say in the field? Is it always going to be true? Are they going to tell me something different next week? How do I know my medicines are safe? How do I know that they don't cause damage that no one's talked about? So they ask us all these questions. So it's a shock. It's a shock to a lot of people. I think it's been a shock to many in the scientific community to discover that half of that information is unavailable. And in particular, when it comes to clinical trials, to discover that the reason why half of that information is unavailable is because it's become perfectly acceptable to hide it, to actively hide it. And so we set up all trials. We worked with the public to establish a campaign that said that's actually really unacceptable. It's worse than unacceptable. It's dangerous, and we're not going to stand for it. We did that 2.5 years ago. From day one, it was a campaign. We're a tiny organisation. It's a campaign that relied on everyone putting their shoulder to the wheel with us, and that's been a growing thing. This is how it started in the UK and Europe. It very quickly is launched this year, just a few months of launch in the USA, and already you can see those shoulders going to the wheel here as well. It's a campaign that has relied on public voices to make this point. rather than a letter in the BMJ and all the things that people have raised the flag with over the years, this is a voice of the public making this point. And I actually want you to hear those voices as in the UK they've been articulating this point. Oh, I'm going to click it out once again.
When you talk about this problem to patients and the public, but also doctors and policymakers, they are appalled at what we've tolerated. We've had 3 decades of failing to fix this problem, and the time really has come to draw a line underneath it and fix it for good.
When I saw the doctor who gave me the diagnosis, I wanted to hear anything but the word cancer, but that didn't happen. When, a couple of days later, my doctor raised the possibility of a clinical trial, there wasn't really much of a decision that I felt that I had to make. I genuinely wanted some good to come out of my situation, no matter what was going to happen to me. To find out that not all clinical trials were being published is just horrifying. It's an insult to me and to everyone else who volunteers to do these trials.
Doctors have unintentionally wasted huge amounts of money on treatments which either are less effective than we thought or were unnecessarily expensive, and we've exposed patients to harm by giving them the less effective of the currently available treatments, simply because clinical trial results have been withheld from us. The best currently available evidence shows that on average the chances of a completed trial being published are roughly 50-50, and trials with positive, flattering results are about twice as likely to be published as trials with negative results.
The vast majority of medicines we use every day came on the market a decade or more ago. It's these trials where half of them haven't published results, so for the medicines we use every day, information is missing.
How can they possibly run trials in healthy volunteers, or worse, on sick people, knowing that they don't intend to make the information available?
We need immediate access to the full methods and results of all trials on all uses of all the treatments that are currently being prescribed to millions of patients today.
Hundreds of organisations who have joined the campaign, including research funders, companies and academic institutes, have started serious discussions about all they can do to achieve more transparency.
Terms like trust and transparency haven't been closely associated with the industry. And at GSK we've realised there's more we can do to be more open and transparent about the research we conduct. And if independent researchers can come along and provide a fresh perspective on the research we've done, that's great for science, it's great for us, and most importantly, it's going to improve patient care.
Clinical trials aren't just done on drugs, they're done on psychiatric treatments, medical devices, surgical techniques, in veterinary science. Anybody who funds and runs clinical trials should sign up to the campaign. Yes, it's worrying about what you might find. Everybody has skeletons in their cupboards. But now is the time for more companies and more institutes to make a commitment.
We know that withholding the results of clinical trials costs lives, wastes money, inflicts avoidable suffering and harm on patients. And so I don't think it's any longer tenable to say, we didn't know.
To make medicine better, we've got to make clinical trials count. Please share this film with friends and family and sign the petition at alltrials.net.
You can applaud if you want. And you know what, you can especially applaud, that video was made with thousands of people putting their hands in their pockets and finding a few dollars. And I'm delighted to say that our colleagues in the US are actually in the process of, they've just launched exactly the same crowdsourced appeal, and a US video is on its way at the moment. So I very much hope that you'll be supporting that. There's a couple of things I want to talk to you about briefly from this. One is, I cannot emphasize enough the role of the public in change making. You know, a number of things. I mean, one is that 30 years this problem's been talked about, and it has only been when we've got the public alongside us talking about this problem in their organisations in many different circles that we're starting to see people take notice. And it's rather obvious. I mean, you know that public representatives, people who rely on public votes, people who rely on public as consumers. You can see why it is that they're concerned about their reputation in the public, why they care about the same things that the public care about. So that's obviously very important. But I think sometimes we underestimate the fact that the institutions that, we're all talking about change here, the institutions also have many people that you should treat more as members of the public and responsive to members of the public. For example, you think that you're talking to other academics about the kinds of issues, but the institutions we're talking about changing, the universities, the companies, they contain people who do really care about the public standing of their organisations. And so you do need the public's voices with you in those discussions. Decision makers within institutions are lay members of the public who relate to this public conversation. I also think the public conversation demands more answers from people. There is a limit to which the world is ever going to listen to people in white coats wagging their fingers, and I think we need to recognise that. The public's, of course, very influential on regulators because the mandate of regulators is usually to protect the public. And it trains us to solve a problem and to speak in human. So it's very important that we put problems in simple language and in human language. Well, that's what we do, and here's what we want you to do to support it. Clearly, we want you to support what we've been doing. Speak up about the issues that we've been talking about. Take the problem to people's doors. Don't just talk amongst ourselves, but actually challenge people who put across their results into the public domain in a way that is misrepresenting them, is not honest. Speak in that language of public research, that public language of research. You can see the public's ready to have a conversation about what we know, how we know it, and how reliable that information is. So speak to that in your discussions. And finally, I think this point about taking people with you. I mean, it's fantastic to wave a flag, but what we don't want, as with all trials, we've never wanted people to think that all of what they see and hear is rubbish, right? That's not going to help, garbage, I think perhaps something you call it. That's not going to help anyone. What we want them to understand is that there's work to be done and that we're involved in doing it. That the work we need to do is to sort out what can be relied on from what can't be relied on. And that's something that we're engaging with and that we want them to engage in. What we don't want to do is just tell them that they can give up on science. We want to show them that science is the tool with which we're going to sort this out. Thank you.